Hello everyone, welcome to the first ever Finhancers Mid-week digest, and it is our inaugural episode, and we're going to be talking about some very interesting things as part of this first ever podcast that we have launched. And of course, although there are millions of topics to talk about, I've picked this one interesting topic that all of us have in our minds, and especially given that we are at the season where we are filing our tax returns, I'm sure we're all asking ourselves, what is the government doing with our money? What is the government doing with our money? And you're probably wondering yourself, because there are many of you that are filing your taxes and you're asking yourself, what is the government actually doing with our hard-earned money? And that's a question that I wanted to address, because many youngsters that come up to me ask me, Adarsh, how is the government using my money? Why should I pay my tax returns? Why should I pay my taxes? Why should I do it? Is there any particular reason why I should do it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to address as part of this session. And of course, there are many of you that can relate to this. Here are some popular opinions from our internet experts. By the way, I respectfully disagree with all those statements that you may have just seen as part of the video, and here's why. To prove why, we must understand how the government makes money every year. In simple terms, the Indian government relies on three sources of income, starting with capital receipts. These are receipts of loans raised by the government from the public or other organizations, including the World Bank, International Development Association, and more, because there are so many organizations. And the government also relies on something called revenue receipts. These are nothing but tax receipts as well as non-tax receipts, and I'll explain what those are. Tax receipts are those that come in the form of direct and indirect taxes from all of us citizens. And there are non-tax receipts such as income that we get from interest on loans, dividends on investments, and quite a lot. And these are major sources of income that the government makes money from, and I would say a good chunk of it comes from the public. Now, how much is the government exactly making? Because as of the financial year 2024-2025, the overall receipts are expected to be around 30.8 lakh crore, leaving capital borrowings. And when I say capital borrowings, I'm talking about money that the government borrows from the World Bank or any other international association. And out of this 30.8 lakh crore that the government is expecting to receive during the course of this financial year, around 30.01 lakh crore shall be in the form of revenue receipts. That's right, around 30.01 lakh crore out of the 30.8 lakh crore that the government is talking about is purely going to come from revenue receipts, and that is nothing but the taxes, both direct as well as indirect taxes. And the balance shall be in the form of 79,000 crores, and another 29,000 crores and 50,000 crores respectively are expected to come from recovery of loans and divestments. When I say divestments, in case if they were to sell any of their existing stock holdings, say the government also owns LIC, in case if they were to divest some of the shares in these organizations, they might make some money. But what does this mean for us? This means that government heavily relies on revenue receipts. And in other words, the government relies on tax and non-tax receipts. Ultimately, that means they rely on you to pay your taxes. And as of 2022, the tax receipts accounted for over 53% of the overall income of the entire country, while non-tax receipts accounted for only around 12.66%. And this figure has only grown ever since. Now, what does this mean for all of us? What does this mean for all of us? And I'm sure most of us are asking ourselves, how much are the government expecting to spend this financial year? Because in 2024-25, they're expecting to spend around 47.65 lakh crore. But wait, the government is only earning around 30 lakh crore and they're looking to spend around 47.65 lakh crore. That's absolutely insane, don't you think? Because from what I see, that is a bit of a concern, yes, but not so much of a concern. And I'll explain that later during the course of the video. But what is the government spending money on? Because 47.8 lakh crore is a huge amount of money. Now today, if you look at it, there are quite a lot of money that is being spent on various sectors, be it defense, road transport and highways, railways, consumer affairs, home affairs, rural development, communication, chemicals, education, and so on and so forth. And there are quite a lot of other sectors that the government also invests money on, and this chart that you see in front of you can depict that. And this is for various years. If you look at the column 1, which addresses the actual amount of money that the government spent as opposed to how much they had projected. And by the way, the government had only projected that they'd spend around 39.44 lakh crore in 2022-23, but they ended up spending around 41.93 lakh crore, which is a significant amount of money. And as of this financial year, the government is projecting to spend around 47.65 lakh crore, which is a lot of money. And that purely will come from the pockets of all of us, citizens of the country. And there are many schemes that the government has also introduced to make life a lot easier for all of us citizens. And these are very significant schemes, starting from, say, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which you see right in front of you on the chart. This depicts the kind of money that they spent in the year 2022-23, and they're expecting to spend in 2024-25, as well as the financial year 23-24, which is given in the middle. That shows the budgeted amount and the revised amount. If you look at the budgeted amount and the revised amount, you'll see a staggering difference for some of the schemes. That goes to show the emphasis that the government is trying to exert on some of the sectors that we have in the economy as of today. But then what does it mean to us as individuals? What does it mean to us as of today? Now, if we talk about individuals in general, there are a handful of schemes that have been introduced. Now, there are quite a lot of schemes that have been introduced, but I'm only stating some of them as part of this video. Starting with the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, which is nothing but a affordable life insurance cover of only around 2 lakh rupees, which any individual, yes, any individual, as long as they have a bank account, can avail for only around 436 rupees a year. And there was a time this was only worth 300 rupees a year. And the Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, which is a accidental death and disability cover, which would give you as much as 2 lakh rupees for only a premium of 20 rupees per person. And to move forward, there are quite a lot of other schemes, including the Senior Citizen Savings Scheme and the Post Office, a monthly investment scheme that the government introduced a long time ago, which initially had a limit of 15 lakh rupees, but now it has been extended to 30 lakh rupees. And it offers a return of anywhere around 8.2% for a Senior Citizen Savings Scheme. And for the monthly income scheme, you can get a return of anywhere around 7.4%, which makes it very, very attractive for senior citizens and any individual alike that wants to deploy their money. But then what is the government doing for women? Well, that's something that's also been addressed, because if you look at the Mahila Samman savings certificate, which any woman can invest in and can get a return of around 7.5% per annum. And to move forward, the government has been heavily investing on affordable housing, which is very, very important. And this comes under a scheme called the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which I addressed just before. And this was introduced all the way back in 2015, and they had a very small target, but now they've gone over and beyond, and they've built as many as 1.58 crore houses as of financial year 23-24 across the country, especially in countries where there's a genuine need for housing. And given that our country, where there are quite a lot of people that don't have affordable housing, this scheme paves the way for a wonderful, wonderful environment for all of us. And last but not the least, of course, there are many more schemes that have also been introduced, but there is one interesting scheme that was introduced called the Atal Pension Yojana for individuals to get a regular pension on their respective investments that they make, and even a small contribution will be more than enough to kickstart this investment for you, and the list just goes on. Now, coming to the point, in simple terms, is the government wasting your money? No, the government is not wasting your money. Of course, our expenses are higher than income, but we are a developing nation, and this is common amongst developing nations. Because as of financial year 23-24, our fiscal deficit is nothing but the difference between the revenue of the government and the expenditure of the government. And it was initially pegged at 5.9% of our GDP, which at the moment is over 3 trillion. And we are one of the largest economies in the world at this point of time. But although our expected fiscal deficit was 5.9% of the GDP, it turned out to be only 5.8% of the GDP. And this year we are pegging our GDP, or rather we are pegging our fiscal deficit at 5.1% of the overall GDP. But how can we improve the situation of the country? Because we are in a situation where the fiscal deficit is high, but of course it's not a concern by any means, because there are quite a lot of countries, particularly developing nations, who have a high fiscal deficit. And the government makes up for it by borrowing from major organizations including the World Bank and the International Development Association. And of course, these are long-term borrowings, so they can slowly pay them back without any problems. But we can probably move to a country where the deficit is lower by paying our taxes. Paying taxes is significant for the government to continue improving the infrastructure, the healthcare facilities, education, making life accessible and easier for every individual on this country at this point of time. And we'd like all of you to keep this aspect in mind before you think about what is the government doing with your money. And on that note, I'd like to conclude this week's episode of the Finhancers Mid-week Digest. And I'm sure you have quite a lot of questions that you might have in mind regarding what the government does with your money. And for any questions, please feel free to put in any comments in the comment section, and we'd be more than happy to look into it and answer it. In case if you want me to work on a different video of the same type, then please do let me know and I'll do that as well. And please make sure to visit finhancers.com and download our mobile app, both on Play Store as well as iOS. And I'm sure there's more to come from this point onwards. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.